The story opens with a vivid depiction of the harsh, isolated landscape where the girl lives, a sprawling, sun-baked ranch, its fences weathered and creaking in the wind, the wide-open plains stretching endlessly under a brilliant but merciless sun. The environment itself mirrors the girl's life, barren, lonely, and unforgiving. From the very first lines, readers sense a tension between the natural beauty of the surroundings and the oppression she endures within them. She is introduced as a young woman, quiet and observant, with a gentle demeanor and a kind heart, someone whose very presence exudes empathy and resilience, even in the face of constant mistreatment. Her in-laws are presented almost immediately, establishing the central conflict. They are cruel, controlling, and petty, wielding authority over her in subtle and overt ways. Small moments of cruelty scolding her for trivial errors, assigning her endless chores, and subjecting her to harsh punishments demonstrate a consistent pattern of abuse. For instance, she might be rebuked for not cooking a meal perfectly or for failing to anticipate the whims of her stern mother-in-law, highlighting both the arbitrary nature of her suffering and the deep emotional toll it takes. The in-laws' behavior is designed to evoke reader sympathy for the girl, making her plight both relatable and heart-wrenching. Through introspection and subtle internal monologue, the narrative allows readers to understand her inner world. She reflects on her dreams of freedom, of a life unchained by fear and cruelty. But she also feels trapped by obligation and societal expectations. These thoughts reveal her intelligence and sensitivity, painting a portrait of a young woman not broken by her circumstances, but quietly resisting them in small, internal ways through hope, imagination, and occasional acts of defiance. Physical description and symbolism further underscore her vulnerability. She is often depicted with worn clothes, hands calloused from endless labor, and eyes that carry both sadness and quiet determination. Objects around her, the shack she lives in, the tools she uses, the fence that eventually becomes her prison, are imbued with meaning. The fence, in particular, foreshadows the literal and metaphorical confinement she will face, symbolizing the barriers imposed upon her by the in-laws and society at large. This part also carefully establishes the emotional stakes. The girl's isolation is not merely physical. It is deeply psychological. Her in-laws' cruelty has eroded her sense of security and belonging. She navigates a life in which kindness is rare and compassion even rarer, making her eventual rescue all the more poignant. Small interactions, like fleeting moments of fleeting solace in the presence of a farm animal or a memory of happier times before her marriage, hint at her capacity for hope despite her harsh reality. Finally, introduces a sense of suspense and anticipation. As she carries out her daily chores under the watchful eyes of her in-laws, readers begin to feel the tension of impending disaster or escalation, an intuitive sense that her suffering cannot continue indefinitely and that a pivotal change is imminent. This foreshadowing is subtle but effective, preparing the reader for the entrance of the rancher, the catalyst who will challenge her in-laws' cruelty and alter the course of her life. In sum, immerses readers in the girl's constrained world, balancing rich environmental detail, psychological depth, and emotional resonance. By the end of this section, the audience not only understands the cruelty she faces, but also empathizes deeply with her courage and longing for begins. Immediately after the initial setup of the girl's life under the oppressive hand of her in-laws, whereas established the environment and her ongoing suffering, the intensifies the tension, showing the reader that her hardships are not merely background, they are active, escalating, and threatening. This section focuses on how the in-laws' cruelty grows more severe, highlighting both the arbitrary nature of their punishments and the girl's increasing vulnerability. The day starts like any other, with the girl performing a series of chores under the unrelenting glare of her in-laws. Every action she takes is scrutinized, every small mistake magnified into a moral failing in their eyes. Perhaps she spills a pail of water while feeding the animals, or the bread she baked comes out slightly overcooked. To an outsider, these errors are trivial, but her in-laws see them as justification for harsh discipline. This contrast between her sincere efforts and the in-laws' unreasonable expectations establishes the unfairness of her situation and reinforces her isolation. The escalation is both physical and psychological. The in-laws decide that her continued failures demand public humiliation and punishment. This culminates in the act that gives the story its dramatic hook. The girl is tied to a fence. The narrative describes this scene in detail, emphasizing her discomfort, fear, and helplessness. The fence is not merely a physical restraint. It represents the power her in-laws wield over her life, the societal constraints she faces, and the literal and figurative barriers to her freedom. Her wrists are bound, the rough rope cutting slightly into her skin, and she feels the unforgiving sun or chill pressing down on her. This vivid imagery allows readers to physically and emotionally feel her suffering. As she sits restrained, the story delves into her internal state. Panic mixes with resignation. She recalls moments of fleeting kindness from strangers or dreams of escape, wondering if she will ever experience freedom. This internal monologue conveys her intelligence and resourcefulness. She is not a passive victim but a thinking, feeling individual trapped in circumstances beyond her control. The in-laws' voices, yelling or sneering in the background, contrast sharply with her quiet desperation, emphasizing the imbalance of power and the cruelty she faces. It also uses foreshadowing to build suspense. The reader becomes aware that this punishment, though severe, may inadvertently set the stage for her rescue. The extremity of her situation signals that change is necessary and imminent. An external force, whether fate or the arrival of the rancher, will intervene. The heightened stakes make the audience emotionally invested in her survival and eventual liberation. The narrative may also briefly introduce other characters. Awareness of the situation, a neighbor noticing the girl from a distance, or a passing traveler sensing the tension in the air. This subtle inclusion hints at the coming arrival of the rancher without explicitly revealing him yet, maintaining suspense while adding depth to the world around her. By the end of the audience fully comprehends the severity of the girl's predicament. The in-laws' cruelty has reached a point where escape is not just desirable, but necessary for her survival, both physically and emotionally. The tension is at its peak, and the reader is primed for the dramatic entrance of the rancher in the next section. The stakes are clear. The girl's safety, dignity, and future hang in the balance, and only decisive action can alter the trajectory of her life freedom. It sets the stage for the action, conflict, and eventual liberation that will define the story's arc. It marks the turning point in the story, the moment when the girl's isolation is disrupted by the arrival of an outsider, the rancher, who will become her rescuer and protector. Up until this point, the narrative has been steeped in tension, emphasizing her vulnerability and the cruelty of her in-laws. The arrival of the rancher introduces a glimmer of hope, but it is also layered with suspense, as the audience is left to wonder how he will confront the in-laws and whether he can truly change her fate. The rancher is introduced with an aura of quiet strength and authority. He is a man who commands respect through his presence rather than through words or violence. Perhaps he rides along the ridge of the hills, noticing the scene below, a young woman tied to a fence, her small frame tense with fear, and the imposing figures of her in-laws standing nearby, their harsh words carried by the wind. His first impressions are critical. He does not rush in blindly but assesses the situation, his calm observation contrasting with the chaos of the girl's immediate surroundings. This careful approach establishes him as a capable and strategic figure, someone who can challenge the in-laws effectively. The narrative builds tension by focusing on the girl's perception of this new presence. She is initially wary, conditioned by years of abuse to distrust outsiders. When she first notices the rider in the distance, she hesitates to hope, unsure whether he is friend or foe. This internal conflict adds psychological depth to her character, showing both her vulnerability and her cautious resilience. Readers share her uncertainty, heightening the emotional engagement of the scene. As the rancher draws closer, the story emphasizes sensory details to make his arrival vivid. The rhythmic clop of hooves on dry earth, the glint of sunlight on his hat or rifle, and the dust rising from the trail all contribute to a cinematic sense of movement. These details not only create suspense, but also establish the rancher as a tangible, commanding presence, someone who has the ability to intervene in the girl's plight. The first interaction between the rancher and the in-laws is deliberately tense. He does not immediately issue threats or act aggressively. Instead, his mere presence unsettles the in-laws, who are unaccustomed to encountering someone who challenges their dominance. The dialogue, sharp and minimal, conveys authority. Perhaps he calls out a simple demand: "Release her." This directness contrasts sharply with the in-laws' abusive language, establishing a clear moral and power dichotomy. The tension of the scene is amplified by the reader's anticipation of how the in-laws will react. Will they comply, mock him, or escalate the confrontation? Meanwhile, the girl's emotional state becomes a focal point. She is torn between disbelief, relief, and fear. Relief at the possibility of rescue clashes with doubt, as she has been betrayed or abandoned before. The narrative captures the rapid heartbeat, the tightening muscles, and the trembling hands that accompany this emotional whirlwind, making her fear and cautious hope palpable to readers. It also sets up the thematic foundation of the story: courage, protection, and the possibility of redemption. The rancher embodies the external force that can challenge injustice, while the girl represents resilience and the human desire for freedom. Their encounter, even before direct action is taken, establishes a bond of implicit trust that will be built upon in later sections. By the end of the tension reaches its peak. The rancher is poised to intervene, the in-laws are confronted with someone capable of opposing them, and the girl is on the cusp of her first taste of hope and agency in the story. This section effectively bridges her suffering with the promise of rescue, propelling the narrative forward into the dramatic action of. Initial confrontation escalates the story as tension as the rancher takes decisive action to confront the in-laws and assert his authority. Up until now, his presence has been a symbol of hope, but in this part, he moves from observer to actor, initiating the confrontation that will determine the girl's immediate fate. This section is crucial because it demonstrates the rancher's courage, the in-laws' cruelty, and the stakes involved in rescuing the girl. The scene begins with a charged standoff. The rancher approaches the fence where the girl is tied, his horse moving with deliberate steadiness, signaling control and confidence. The in-laws are caught off guard. They are not accustomed to opposition, especially from a stranger who shows no fear. The narrative emphasizes body language and posture, hands tightening on tools or ropes, feet shifting nervously, eyes darting suspiciously, capturing the tension between aggressor and challenger. The girl, meanwhile, watches anxiously, her heart racing. She clings to a thread of hope but remains cautious, conditioned by past betrayals to guard her trust. The rancher's first words are calm yet firm, commanding attention without aggression. Let her go. This simple directive carries weight because it is delivered with the confidence of someone who does not question his own strength or moral authority. The in-laws respond with mockery, threats, or anger, attempting to assert dominance in a futile display. Their reaction highlights both their cruelty and their weakness. They rely on fear and intimidation rather than reason or justice. Tension heightens as the standoff unfolds. The rancher does not immediately resort to violence, instead relying on his presence and reputation to intimidate. The narrative may describe subtle cues: the rancher's steady gaze, the way he shifts his weight, the faint glint of his hand near a weapon, all signaling readiness without escalating unnecessarily. This careful choreography of action and reaction keeps the reader on edge, wondering how far the in-laws will push before realizing they are outmatched. The girl's perspective deepens the emotional intensity of the scene. She experiences a complex mix of fear, relief, and awe. Fear because her in-laws are unpredictable and cruel. Relief because someone finally challenges them. Awe because she senses the rancher's strength and moral certainty. This internal reflection humanizes her reaction, making her response believable and emotionally resonant. Readers are drawn into her psyche, feeling the suspense as she silently prays that he can succeed in freeing her. Conflict reaches its climax when the in-laws make a bold move, perhaps stepping toward the rancher with aggression or threatening to harm the girl further. The rancher's decisive response, whether it is a commanding shout, a physical intervention, or simply an unflinching stare, demonstrates his authority and courage. This moment defines his character. He is not reckless, but he is willing to risk confrontation to protect the innocent. The resolution of this confrontation is carefully handled. The in-laws, faced with the rancher's unwavering stance, retreat in fear or frustration, leaving the girl unharmed. The narrative emphasizes the sudden shift from chaos to relief, capturing the girl's tentative hope as she is released from her physical and symbolic restraints. The tension dissolves, but the emotional and psychological impact of the ordeal lingers, highlighting both the trauma she endured and the relief of her first taste of freedom. It concludes with a subtle but powerful moment of connection between the girl and the rancher. Their eyes meet, conveying unspoken trust and recognition of shared purpose. The rancher's words, perhaps something simple like, "You re-safe now," signal both protection and the beginning of a bond that will grow in the subsequent parts. This confrontation serves as a pivotal narrative bridge, transitioning the story from the girl's suffering to her journey toward safety, healing, and eventual empowerment. It focuses on the climactic moment when the rancher physically frees the girl from her bonds, transitioning the story from tension and confrontation to action and relief. While Part 4 dealt with the standoff and psychological duel between the rancher and the in-laws, this section delivers the tangible liberation that both the girl and the audience have been waiting for. It is an emotionally charged scene that emphasizes vulnerability, bravery, and the first steps toward freedom. The scene begins with the rancher stepping closer to the girl, his hands moving with precision to untie the coarse rope that has been cutting into her wrists. The narrative slows to focus on the details, the frayed fibers of the rope, the sharp imprint left on her skin, and the relief that begins to wash over her as each knot is loosened. These small, tactile elements heighten the realism of the rescue and underscore the girl's physical and emotional confinement. Her body, tense for hours under the scorching sun or biting cold, finally begins to relax, signaling the shift from captivity to safety. As she is freed, the girl's immediate reactions are a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and cautious hope. Years of abuse have made her wary of sudden kindness, and she instinctively steps back, unsure whether she can fully trust the rancher. This hesitation makes her character feel authentic and relatable. Internally, she wrestles with a surge of conflicting emotions: relief at escaping her in-laws' cruelty, fear that she is not yet entirely safe, and awe at the courage and resolve of her rescuer. These internal reflections allow readers to connect deeply with her perspective. The rancher as demeanor during the rescue is critical in shaping both the girl's trust and the story as emotional resonance. He is calm, confident, and patient, showing no anger toward her for any perceived failures, contrasting sharply with the in-laws' relentless criticism. His words are few but significant, perhaps a soft reassurance like, "It's all right now. You're safe." These simple statements convey empathy and protection, establishing the foundation of trust that will grow throughout the story. The immediate aftermath of the rescue further emphasizes the emotional and physical stakes. The girl may stumble slightly as she adjusts to freedom, leaning on the rancher for support. The narrative may describe the moment she flexes her wrists for the first time in hours, feeling circulation return to her hands, or the way she takes a deep breath, savoring the air without fear. These small details reinforce her transition from helplessness to agency, highlighting the tangible effects of her liberation. Meanwhile, the in-laws' reaction is left in the background but remains significant. Their retreat, perhaps accompanied by angry shouts or threats, contrasts with the girl's newfound freedom, emphasizing the shift in power dynamics. The rancher's ability to control the situation underscores his competence and reinforces the sense of safety he brings to her life. It also begins to explore the emotional connection between the girl and the rancher. As she begins to walk alongside him, hesitant but curious, readers sense the budding trust and potential for deeper bonds. The rescue is not only physical but symbolic. It represents the first time she has encountered a force acting purely in her interest, marking the start of her journey toward empowerment and healing. By the end of this section, the immediate danger has passed, but the narrative tension remains. The girl is safe, yet questions linger. Will the in-laws pursue her? How will she adapt to freedom? These questions propel the story forward, setting the stage for where trust and character development deepen, and the girl begins to navigate the new world opened up by her rescue. Part 6 shifts the narrative from immediate rescue to the emotional aftermath, focusing on the delicate process of building trust between the girl and the rancher. The physical danger has passed, but psychological scars linger. Years of abuse have left her wary, cautious, and reluctant to fully rely on anyone. This section emphasizes character development, showing how compassion, patience, and gentle guidance can gradually restore a person's sense of safety and agency. The scene opens with the girl standing near the rancher, perhaps still slightly trembling from the ordeal. She is aware of the open space around her, a freedom she has rarely experienced, and this new environment is both thrilling and intimidating. Every sound, the wind through the trees, distant animals, the rancher's calm breathing feels amplified to her, highlighting her heightened awareness of vulnerability. She studies him carefully, looking for any signs of threat, and readers sense her internal struggle, her longing for protection clashing with her ingrained fear of betrayal. The rancher, understanding her cautious demeanor, approaches with patience rather than urgency. He does not demand conversation or immediate gratitude. Instead, he performs small, reassuring acts, offering water, brushing dust from her clothes, or adjusting the saddlebag he carries. These gestures are practical but also symbolic, demonstrating that he is attentive, reliable, and considerate. Through these simple actions, the girl begins to recognize that his intentions are genuine and that he is trustworthy. Dialogue in this section is minimal but significant. When the rancher speaks, his tone is steady and calm, never condescending. For example, he might say, "You don't have to say anything. Just walk with me." Such lines communicate empathy, patience, and respect, giving her control over the pace of their interaction. Readers sense the subtle power of this approach. Trust cannot be forced, and the rancher's restraint reinforces his integrity. It also delves into the girl's internal reflections, revealing her personality, hopes, and resilience. She recalls the harshness of her past, how her in-laws, constant criticism and punishment made her doubt her worth, but she also notices the difference in the rancher's demeanor. For the first time in years, she feels seen as a person rather than an object of control. This realization sparks a cautious optimism, hinting at the emotional growth to come. The narrative may include small moments of shared experience that deepen their bond. Perhaps the rancher points out edible plants, shows her a path across the plains, or shares a simple story of life on his own ranch. These interactions serve multiple purposes. They distract her from fear, allow her to see him as a human being rather than a distant savior, and lay the groundwork for emotional intimacy. Trust is being built not through dramatic gestures, but through consistency, empathy, and reliability. It also foreshadows future challenges. While the girl feels a growing sense of security, she knows her in-laws' cruelty might not be over, and the wider world remains unpredictable. These underlying tensions keep the story grounded, reminding readers that emotional recovery is a process and that her liberation is not yet complete. By the end of this section, a tentative bond has formed. The girl is no longer purely passive or fearful. She begins to assert small choices, like walking beside the rancher instead of behind him, or speaking a few words of gratitude or curiosity. The rancher respects these small assertions, reinforcing her sense of agency. This stage of trust building is crucial. It not only deepens their relationship, but also prepares the narrative for where external threats will test this newly forming alliance and force both characters to act together. It injects the story with urgency and action, testing both the girl's newfound trust in the rancher and the rancher's resourcefulness. After the quiet emotional recovery of Part 6, the narrative pivots back into tension as the in-laws, discovering that the girl has been freed, set out to reclaim her. This section combines suspense, strategy, and physical danger, further developing the characters' bond and demonstrating the stakes of her liberation. The scene opens with subtle hints of danger. Perhaps the girl notices the distant sound of hooves or glimpses a dust cloud on the horizon, and instinctively her body tightens, a reflex honed from years of abuse. The rancher quickly assesses the situation, remaining calm but alert, and his composed response reinforces her trust in him. This contrast between her anxiety and his steady presence allows readers to feel both the immediacy of the threat and the growing reliance she has on his guidance. The escape itself is tense and cinematic. Mounted on horseback, the rancher and the girl traverse rugged terrain, moving through narrow valleys, wooded areas, or open plains. The narrative emphasizes sensory details, the pounding of hooves against dry earth, the wind whipping past their faces, the rhythmic rise and fall of their chests, immersing readers in the immediacy of flight. Every detail accentuates danger as the in-laws close in, shouting threats and brandishing weapons or tools to intimidate. The terrain itself becomes both an obstacle and an ally, as the rancher uses his intimate knowledge of the land to outmaneuver their pursuers. During the chase, the girl's emotions fluctuate. Fear is immediate and visceral, but it is tempered by growing confidence in the rancher. She notices how he reads the landscape, anticipates the in-laws' moves, and takes decisive action, and these observations reinforce her trust. The narrative may include brief moments where she helps pointing out a shortcut, observing a potential trap, or maintaining balance on the horse, which subtly transitions her from passive passenger to active participant. This dynamic strengthens their partnership and foreshadows the equality in their eventual relationship. The in-laws' pursuit escalates tension by forcing the characters into close calls. Perhaps a tree branch scratches the girl's arm, a loose rock threatens to unseat the horse, or the in-laws momentarily gain on them, prompting quick thinking and agility. Each peril heightens suspense while showcasing the rancher's competence and courage. Importantly, the girl witnesses these qualities firsthand, solidifying her perception of him as a protector who can be relied upon, deepening both trust and admiration. Dialogue during the escape is minimal but impactful. The rancher may give concise commands, "Hold on," "This way," or "Stay low." These brief statements convey reassurance, authority, and guidance without diminishing her agency. They also reflect a partnership built on clear communication and mutual reliance, a stark contrast to the abuse and chaos of her past life. The escape concludes with a carefully orchestrated resolution, the rancher successfully puts distance between them, and the in-laws, reaching a safer location such as a remote canyon, his own ranch, or a hidden cabin. Relief floods the girl, but the narrative does not allow complacency. She remains alert, aware that danger may not be completely over. This balance of safety and vigilance keeps readers engaged while highlighting the ongoing consequences of her past trauma. By the end, the girl has not only experienced physical freedom, but also solidified emotional trust in the rancher. They have acted as a team, faced danger together, and survived, laying the foundation for Part 8, where a safe haven offers both respite and opportunities for healing and reflection. The pursuit emphasizes resilience, strategy, and the deepening bond that will define the next stages of the story. Part 8 shifts the narrative from high-stakes action to a moment of reprieve, focusing on the girl's arrival at a safe haven and her first opportunity to experience freedom and security. After the adrenaline of the escape and pursuit, the story slows to explore the emotional and psychological consequences of her ordeal, as well as the growing bond between her and the rancher. This section emphasizes healing, trust, and the quiet relief of survival. The safe haven could be the rancher's secluded homestead, a hidden cabin in the woods, or a protected area on the plains far from the girl's former life. The narrative emphasizes the contrast between this new space and the harsh, oppressive environment she has endured. Details such as the soft, welcoming interior, a warm fire, clean bedding, and the smell of food create a sensory experience of comfort and safety. These descriptions are not merely cosmetic, they symbolize the emotional sanctuary she has finally found, highlighting the stark difference between fear and security. Upon arrival, the girl's physical reactions reflect her relief. She stretches stiff limbs, feeling the tension of hours of restraint and adrenaline dissipate, and she breathes more deeply than she has in weeks or months. These bodily responses mirror her internal state, a growing sense of calm and cautious optimism. Yet, the narrative also acknowledges lingering trauma. She remains vigilant, scanning windows and doors, aware that her in-laws' cruelty might not be entirely behind her. This balance between relaxation and alertness gives her character depth and realism, showing that recovery is a gradual process. The rancher's role in the safe haven is central to this part. He provides care not as a patronizing savior, but as a protector who respects her autonomy. He tends to her physical needs, offering food, water, and warmth, while also giving her space to process her emotions. Small, attentive gestures, a gentle touch on the shoulder, a reassuring nod, or simply letting her choose where to sit communicate empathy, patience, and respect. These actions reinforce the trust established in previous parts and allow the girl to gradually lower her defenses. Dialogue in this section is intimate and reflective, emphasizing the emotional connection developing between them. The rancher may speak softly about mundane matters, like the layout of his property or the animals he cares for, creating a sense of normalcy that contrasts sharply with her previous life of fear. The girl, in turn, begins to share fragments of her story, revealing her fears, regrets, and aspirations. This exchange is cautious at first, but it represents a crucial step toward emotional healing. The narrative focuses on the subtle rhythms of conversation pauses, glances, and shared silence that communicate more than words and deepen their bond. It also explores symbolic elements of healing and rebirth. The safe haven might include natural features such as a flowing river, a sun-drenched field, or a garden in bloom, reinforcing the theme of renewal. The girl may engage in simple restorative activities, feeding animals, tending to chores, or resting by the fire, which allow her to reclaim a sense of agency and purpose. These actions, though small, are transformative. They show that freedom is not just the absence of cruelty, but the presence of choice, safety, and dignity. By the end of this section, the girl has begun to internalize the reality of her safety. The fear that once dominated her life has loosened, replaced by cautious hope and a growing sense of belonging. The rancher has proven to be both protector and steady companion, reinforcing her emotional recovery and setting the stage for deeper connection and trust. This safe haven serves as a narrative pivot, transitioning the story toward emotional resolution, the development of mutual respect, and the eventual exploration of their growing affection. Focuses on the emotional healing and growth that the girl experiences after the trauma of her past and the dramatic events of her rescue and escape. This section deepens the bond between the girl and the rancher while emphasizing her emerging strengths, self-confidence, and sense of agency. Whereas the previous parts focused on physical danger and immediate survival, Part 9 allows the narrative to explore the psychological and emotional consequences of her journey, culminating in a turning point where she begins to reclaim her life and identity. The scene opens in the safe haven, where the girl begins to process her experiences. She reflects on the cruelty of her in-laws, the long hours of labor and punishment, and the helplessness she once felt. These memories are painful but also serve as a contrast to her current situation, highlighting the dramatic shift from oppression to protection. Internally, she experiences a mix of lingering fear, relief, and a cautious optimism that slowly evolves into determination. Readers can feel the weight lifting from her shoulders as she recognizes, perhaps for the first time, that she is no longer defined by the abuse she suffered. The rancher continues to play a central role, but his presence now emphasizes emotional support rather than physical protection. Through small acts of attentiveness, listening when she speaks, offering gentle advice, or giving her space to process her thoughts, he demonstrates respect for her autonomy. This dynamic is essential, as it reinforces the idea that trust is built through patience and consistency. The girl begins to realize that she can rely on someone without fear of manipulation or harm, a revelation that deepens her emotional recovery and allows her to begin forming a genuine attachment. Dialogue between the two characters in this part is intimate and revealing. The rancher may encourage her to speak about her hopes, dreams, and fears, providing an opportunity for vulnerability that she has rarely experienced. She may respond cautiously at first, choosing her words carefully, but over time begins to share more freely. This gradual openness is mirrored in their interactions, shared glances, gentle laughter, and quiet moments of companionship, which communicate trust and mutual respect without the need for dramatic declarations. The emotional connection strengthens naturally, emphasizing realism and depth in their relationship. It also explores symbolic acts of empowerment. The girl may take on tasks around the ranch, care for animals, or engage in activities that allow her to demonstrate competence and agency. These small victories are significant. They represent her reclaiming control over her life, both physically and emotionally. The narrative emphasizes that healing is a gradual process. Freedom is not simply the absence of cruelty, but the presence of opportunities to act, choose, and thrive independently. The resolution of emotional tension in this part also includes the girl confronting and reconciling with her past. While she may never forgive her in-laws entirely, she begins to separate herself from their influence, recognizing that their cruelty no longer defines her identity. This psychological emancipation is as important as her physical liberation, marking a milestone in her journey toward wholeness. By the end, the girl has transformed from a fearful, oppressed young woman into someone capable of trust, connection, and self-determination. The bond with the rancher has solidified into a partnership based on mutual respect and care, hinting at the potential for deeper affection without overshadowing her independence. The narrative tension shifts from immediate danger to the promise of a positive future, setting the stage for where the story closes with a sense of new beginnings, hope, and the fulfillment of her journey toward freedom.